The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain as Sergeant Maria Santos adjusted her radio equipment one final time. She had been stationed in this remote outpost for 3 months now, watching over a vital supply route that enemy forces had been trying to disrupt. The mountain ridge provided the perfect vantage point, but it also meant she was completely alone, miles away from the nearest friendly forces. Maria had always been different from other soldiers. While her comrades preferred the chaos and camaraderie of ground operations, she found peace in solitude and precision. Her sniper rifle, a customized weapon she had named Silent Thunder, had become her most trusted companion. She knew every scratch on its surface, every slight adjustment needed for different weather conditions, and exactly how it would perform at various distances. The radio crackled to life, interrupting her morning routine check. "Overwatch 7, this is Command. We have a situation developing in Sector 5. Hostile forces have been spotted moving toward the village of San Miguel. Our patrol units are approximately 40 minutes out. Can you provide visual confirmation?" Maria quickly grabbed her binoculars and scanned the valley below. Through the morning haze, she could see movement along the dirt road that led to the small village. Her heart sank as she counted at least 12 armed militants, moving with purpose and carrying heavy weapons. The villagers had no idea what was coming their way. "Command, this is Overwatch 7. I have eyes on 12 hostiles, heavily armed, approximately 2 kilometers from San Miguel. They appear to be setting up for an assault on the village. Estimated time to target is 15 minutes. The response came quickly, but it wasn't what she wanted to hear. "Overwatch 7. Our nearest units are still 35 minutes out. The helicopter support is grounded due to mechanical issues. You are the only asset in position to provide assistance." Maria felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. Below in the valley, she could see the peaceful village where families were probably having breakfast, children getting ready for school, and elderly people starting their daily routines. None of them knew that death was approaching their doorstep. She had trained for situations like this, but training and reality were two very different things. In training, targets were paper or mannequins. Here, she would be making life and death decisions that would affect real people. The militants were still moving, and she could see them spreading out to surround the village from multiple directions. "Command, requesting permission to engage. I can take out several targets from this position, but I'll need backup immediately afterward. High position will be compromised once I start firing." There was a long pause on the radio. Maria knew the commanders were weighing their options, calculating risks and benefits. Meanwhile, precious seconds were ticking away, and the militants were getting closer to the village. "Overwatch 7, you are authorized to engage. Backup is en route, but you may need to hold position for up to 40 minutes. Use your best judgment and protect those civilians." Maria took a deep breath and switched off the radio. She settled into her firing position, checking wind direction and distance calculations. Through her scope, she could see the militants more clearly now. They were well equipped and moving like experienced fighters. This wasn't going to be easy. The first target was a man carrying what appeared to be a rocket launcher. He was positioning himself on a hill that would give him a clear shot at the village's main building, which served as both a school and community center. Maria calculated the distance at 800 meters, well within her effective range, but the shot would need to be perfect. She controlled her breathing, slowing her heart rate as she had been taught. The crosshairs settled on her target, and she began to apply pressure to the trigger. Just as she was about to fire, her radio burst to life again. "Overwatch 7, abort mission. Abort. We have civilian vehicles approaching your target area. 2 trucks full of families are trying to evacuate. Do not fire until they clear the area." Maria immediately lifted her head from the scope and grabbed her binoculars. Sure enough, she could see dust clouds approaching from the opposite direction. 2 old pickup trucks loaded with people were racing toward what they thought was safety, but they were actually driving straight into the ambush zone. The militants had seen the trucks too, and they were adjusting their positions to intercept the fleeing families. Maria realized with growing horror that the situation had just become much more complicated. She couldn't fire at the militants without risking hitting the civilians, but if she didn't act soon, everyone in those trucks would be killed or captured. She watched helplessly as the lead truck rounded a bend and came into full view of the militants. The driver must have spotted the armed men because the truck suddenly swerved and tried to turn around. But it was too late. The militants opened fire, and Maria could see muzzle flashes erupting from multiple positions. The first truck's windshield exploded, and the vehicle careened off the road, rolling down a small embankment. The second truck slammed on its brakes and tried to reverse, but it was caught in the open with nowhere to hide. Maria could see women and children in the back of the truck, screaming and trying to take cover. "Command, civilian vehicles are under fire. I need to engage now or they're all going to die." Negative, Overwatch 7. Too much risk of civilian casualties. Wait for the trucks to clear. But Maria could see that the trucks weren't going anywhere. The first one was disabled and the second was trapped. The militants were advancing on both vehicles and she could hear the sound of automatic weapons fire echoing across the valley. She had seconds to make a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life: follow orders and watch innocent people die, or disobey direct commands and risk everything to save them. Through her scope, she could see a little girl in the back of the second truck, no more than 6 years old, crying as bullets flew around her. Maria made her choice. She switched her radio to emergency frequency and spoke clearly into the microphone. "All stations, this is Overwatch 7. I am engaging hostile targets to protect civilians under fire. Backup requested immediately. Silent thunder is going hot." Maria's first shot rang out across the valley like thunder splitting the morning silence. The militant with the rocket launcher dropped instantly, his weapon clattering down the rocky slope. She didn't pause to confirm the kill. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, working the bolt and chambering another round while simultaneously acquiring her next target. The second shot came 3 seconds later. A militant who had been advancing on the disabled truck spun and fell. Now the remaining fighters knew they were under sniper fire, and chaos erupted in their ranks. Some dove for cover behind rocks and trees, while others fired wildly in her general direction, their bullets falling harmlessly short of her elevated position. "Get down. Stay in the trucks," Maria shouted, though she knew the civilians couldn't hear her from this distance. Through her scope, she watched as the adults in the vehicles tried to shield the children with their own bodies. The sight filled her with both rage and determination. Her third shot eliminated a militant who was trying to flank the second truck. The man had been creeping along a stone wall using it for cover, but Maria's elevated position gave her an angle he hadn't anticipated. The remaining militants were now completely disorganized, unsure where the shots were coming from and afraid to expose themselves. The radio crackled with urgent transmissions. "Overwatch 7, what is your status? Command is reading multiple shots fired. This is Overwatch 7. I have engaged 9 hostiles, 3 confirmed kills. Civilians are still in danger, but the immediate threat has been reduced. I need that backup now." Maria continued scanning the area through her scope, looking for targets of opportunity. She could see several militants had taken cover in a small cluster of buildings about 600 meters from the trucks. They were regrouping, and she knew they would soon figure out her position and either retreat or mount a counterattack. Her fourth shot came when one of the militants made the mistake of exposing himself while trying to get a better view of the trucks. The bullet found its mark and the man disappeared behind a low wall. Maria was keeping count. 4 down, at least 8 still active, and more might be approaching from other directions. The families in the trucks were starting to move. The driver of the second truck, realizing that someone was providing cover fire, began slowly reversing away from the danger zone. The first truck was still disabled, but Maria could see people climbing out and taking shelter behind the overturned vehicle. Overwatch 7, this is Captain Rodriguez. I'm leading the relief column. We're 25 minutes out. Can you hold your position? Affirmative, Captain, but these militants are going to figure out where I am soon. They're already starting to coordinate their movements. As if to prove her point, Maria saw muzzle flashes from 3 different positions, all aimed in her general direction. The bullets struck the rocks below her position, sending chips of stone flying. They were getting closer to pinpointing her location. She shifted position slightly, moving about 10 meters to her left where another cluster of rocks provided cover. The movement probably saved her life because seconds later, a burst of automatic fire raked across her previous position. From her new vantage point, Maria could see that 2 militants were trying to work their way up the slope toward her. They were still several hundred meters away and using good tactical movement, but their approach route would eventually bring them within range of her secondary weapons. Her 5th shot took out a militant who was trying to advance on the civilians from a different angle. The man had been moving from cover to cover, getting closer to the overturned truck where several family members were hiding. Maria's bullet caught him just as he broke cover to sprint to the next position. The psychological effect of the sniper fire was becoming evident. The militants were becoming increasingly cautious, taking longer between movements and staying in cover for extended periods. This gave the civilians more time to escape, but it also meant the militants were adapting to the threat she represented. Maria's radio came alive with a different voice. "Overwatch 7, this is Lieutenant Hayes. I'm in the lead vehicle of the relief column. We can see smoke from your position. What's your ammunition status?" She quickly checked her remaining rounds. "I have 15 rounds remaining for long-range engagement, plus my sidearm and backup rifle. But I've got hostiles climbing the slope toward my position. They're about 12 minutes out if they maintain their current pace." "Copy that. We're pushing hard to reach you. Hold tight." Maria knew that 12 minutes might as well be 12 hours in a firefight. She needed to slow down the militants approaching her position while continuing to protect the civilians below. The families had managed to get some distance from the ambush site, but they were still vulnerable if the militants broke contact and pursued them. Her sixth shot was a difficult one. One of the militants approaching her position had taken cover behind a large boulder, but Maria could see his feet extending beyond the edge of the rock. It wasn't a killing shot, but the bullet shattered his ankle, effectively removing him from the fight. His screams of pain echoed across the mountainside, which she hoped would demoralize his companions. The psychological warfare was working. Maria could see the remaining militants becoming more hesitant, their movements less coordinated. Fear was setting in as they realized they were being hunted by a skilled marksman who seemed to see everything. But Maria knew her own situation was becoming more precarious by the minute. The militants who had been climbing toward her position were getting closer, and she could see more movement in the valley below. It appeared that additional hostile forces were arriving as reinforcements. "Command, this is Overwatch 7. I'm seeing more hostiles approaching from the south. Looks like at least 6 additional fighters, possibly more. The situation is deteriorating. Overwatch 7 relief column is now 15 minutes out. You need to hold that position and continue protecting those civilians." Maria chambered another round and settled back into her scope. Through the magnified optics, she could see that some of the family members were helping wounded individuals from the first truck. An elderly man appeared to be injured, and 2 women were trying to carry him to safety. The sight strengthened her resolve. These weren't soldiers or combatants. They were innocent people caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. They had families, dreams, and lives that were worth protecting. Whatever happened to her, she was going to make sure they made it home safely. Her 7th shot rang out as another militant tried to pursue the fleeing families. The bullet struck him center mass, dropping him instantly. But as she worked the bolt to chamber another round, Maria heard something that made her blood run cold. The distinctive sound of a helicopter approaching from the south. She grabbed her binoculars and scanned the sky. There it was, a military helicopter, but not one she recognized as friendly. The aircraft was heading straight for the fleeing civilians, and Maria realized that the situation had just become much more complicated. The helicopter appeared over the ridge like a mechanical vulture, its rotors beating a threatening rhythm against the morning air. Maria immediately recognized it as an enemy aircraft, an old Soviet-era gunship that had been modified with additional weapon systems. The sight of it made her stomach drop because she knew exactly what it was capable of doing to the defenseless families below. "Command, this is Overwatch 7. Enemy helicopter approaching from the south, heading directly for the civilian evacuation route. I need air support immediately." "Negative, Overwatch 7. No air assets available." "You're on your own." Maria watched through her scope as the gunship began to circle the area where the families were trying to escape. The pilot was obviously communicating with the ground forces, coordinating an attack that would trap the civilians between the helicopter above and the militants on the ground. She had to make a decision quickly. Her rifle was powerful, but taking on a helicopter with a sniper rifle was almost impossible. The aircraft was armored, and unless she could hit something vital like the pilot or engine components, her bullets would just bounce off the hull. But she had to try something. The helicopter was maintaining a distance of about 400 meters from her position, circling slowly as it prepared to engage the civilians. Maria could see the door gunner preparing his weapon, and she knew she had only seconds before they opened fire on the trucks below. Her 8th shot was aimed at the cockpit, hoping to hit the pilot or at least crack the windscreen enough to impair his vision. The bullet struck the aircraft's nose section, causing it to wobble slightly but not enough to bring it down. The pilot immediately began evasive maneuvers, making it much harder for Maria to get another clean shot. The helicopter's response was swift and terrifying. The door gunner opened fire with a heavy machine gun, sending a stream of bullets raking across Maria's position. She dove for cover as chunks of rock exploded around her, the impact so close she could feel the heat from the ricocheting bullets. From her new position behind a larger boulder, Maria could hear the helicopter changing course. It was moving toward her now. Having identified her as the primary threat, she knew that once it got close enough, the aircraft's superior firepower would overwhelm her position completely. But the helicopter's movement toward her had an unintended consequence. It was no longer positioned to attack the fleeing civilians. Maria realized that by drawing the aircraft's attention to herself, she was giving the family's precious time to escape. Overwatch 7. This is Captain Rodriguez. We can hear the helicopter from our position. What's your status? I'm pinned down by enemy aircraft. The civilians are moving toward the northern evacuation route, but they're still vulnerable. How far out are you? 12 minutes, but we can see the smoke from the battle. Hold on, we're coming. Maria knew 12 minutes was an eternity in her current situation. The helicopter was getting closer, and she could hear the militants on the ground coordinating their assault on her position. They were using the aircraft as a distraction while they moved up the slope toward her. She risked a quick look around her, cover, and immediately ducked back as another burst of machine gun fire chewed up the rocks where her head had been. But in that brief moment, she had seen something important. The helicopter was hovering directly over a cluster of fuel drums that the militants had apparently brought with them for their operation. Maria had an idea. It was dangerous and probably wouldn't work, but it was better than sitting behind a rock waiting to be overrun. She carefully aimed her rifle at the largest fuel drum, calculating the distance and adjusting for the wind. If she could ignite the fuel, the explosion might damage the helicopter or at least force it to retreat. Her 9th shot struck the fuel drum dead center. For a moment nothing happened, and Maria thought her plan had failed. Then a small flame appeared, followed by a much larger explosion as the fuel ignited. The blast was so powerful that it knocked the helicopter sideways, forcing the pilot to fight for control. The explosion had another effect. It scattered the militants who had been using the fuel dump as a staging area. Maria could see several men running away from the flames, and at least 2 appeared to be injured by flying debris. But her victory was short-lived. The helicopter pilot had regained control, and now the aircraft was heading straight for her position with obvious hostile intent. Maria could see the door gunner preparing to unleash everything he had at her location. She grabbed her radio and switched to the emergency frequency. Any friendly aircraft in the area, this is Overwatch 7. I am under attack by enemy helicopter at grid reference 77 Alpha. Request immediate assistance. Overwatch 7, this is Falcon 2-1. We're a friendly gunship about 8 minutes out. Can you mark your position? Maria felt a surge of hope. Falcon 2-1. I am located on the ridge overlooking the valley. Enemy helicopter is circling my position at low altitude. I'm marking my location with smoke now. She pulled a smoke grenade from her gear and tossed it about 20 meters away from her position. The bright orange smoke would help the friendly aircraft identify her location while hopefully confusing the enemy helicopter about her exact position. The enemy pilot saw the smoke and immediately opened fire on it, raking the area with machine gun bullets. Maria used the distraction to move to yet another position, this time finding cover behind a natural rock formation that offered better protection from aerial attack. From her new position, she could see that the civilians had made significant progress toward safety. The trucks were now almost a kilometer away from the original ambush site, and she could see dust clouds indicating they were still moving. But they weren't safe yet. More militants were arriving in the valley, and some appeared to be setting up roadblocks on the evacuation route. Maria's 10th shot took out a militant who was trying to set up a heavy machine gun to block the civilian escape route. The distance was extreme, almost 900 meters, but the bullet found its mark, sending the man spinning to the ground. The enemy helicopter had noticed where her shot had come from and was now moving directly toward her new position. Maria could see the pilot's face through the cockpit glass, and she realized he was determined to eliminate her regardless of the cost. She chambered another round and made a desperate decision. Instead of trying to hide from the helicopter, she was going to engage it directly. As the aircraft approached her position, flying low and slow to get an accurate shot, Maria aimed directly at the pilot's compartment. Her 11th shot shattered the helicopter's windscreen, and she could see the pilot slumping forward. The aircraft immediately began to spiral out of control, its rotors screaming as it lost altitude rapidly. The helicopter crashed into the side of the mountain about 200 meters below Maria's position, exploding in a fireball that sent black smoke billowing into the sky. The sound of the explosion echoed across the valley, and for a moment everything seemed to go quiet. But Maria knew the battle wasn't over. The militants on the ground were still a threat, and she could see them regrouping after the shock of losing their air support. She had 4 rounds left in her current magazine, plus her backup ammunition, and she intended to use every single bullet to protect those innocent families. The crash of the helicopter had sent shockwaves through the militant forces below, but Maria knew their confusion wouldn't last long. She could already see them reorganizing, and worse yet, she spotted what appeared to be a commander figure gesturing and shouting orders to the scattered fighters. This man was rallying the troops, and Maria realized he would be her next priority target. Through her scope, she studied the commander carefully. He was older than the other militants, moved with confidence, and clearly had military training based on how he positioned himself and directed the others. Taking him out would likely cause the remaining forces to lose coordination, but he was smart enough to stay mostly behind cover. Maria's 12th shot had to wait. The commander was using a damaged vehicle as cover, only exposing himself for brief moments. She needed to be patient and wait for the right opportunity. Meanwhile, she could hear the friendly helicopter getting closer. The sound of its rotors was distinctly different from the enemy aircraft she had just brought down. Falcon 2-1. This is Overwatch 7. Enemy helicopter is down, but I still have multiple hostiles on the ground. The civilian vehicles are moving north on the main road, but hostiles are attempting to set up roadblocks. Copy that, Overwatch 7. We have visual on the smoke from the crash. Outstanding work. We're 3 minutes out and ready to provide close air support. The sound of approaching friendly air support had an immediate effect on the militants below. Several of them began retreating toward previously prepared positions, while others seemed to be arguing about whether to continue the fight or withdraw completely. Maria could see the commander trying to maintain order, but his men were clearly shaken. She finally got her opportunity when the commander stepped out to retrieve a radio from one of the fallen fighters. Maria's 12th shot caught him in the chest and he collapsed immediately. The effect on the remaining militants was exactly what she had hoped for. Without their leader, they began to scatter in different directions, but Maria's position was about to become untenable for a different reason. The 2 militants who had been climbing the slope toward her were now very close, maybe 5 minutes away from her position. She could hear them calling to each other as they coordinated their final approach. They had been working their way up the mountain while she was focused on the helicopter and the forces below. She quickly switched to her backup rifle, a shorter-range weapon that would be more suitable for close-quarters combat. The sniper rifle was excellent for long-distance shots, but if the militants reached her position, she would need something more maneuverable. Maria could hear voices getting closer. The 2 men were speaking in a language she didn't recognize, but their tone was cautious. They knew they were approaching a dangerous opponent, and they were taking their time to minimize their own risk. She used the time to change her position once again, moving to a spot where she could see the most likely approaches to her location. The new position gave her good cover and multiple escape routes if she needed to retreat further up the mountain. The first militant appeared about 50 meters below her position, moving carefully from rock to rock. Maria could see he was carrying an assault rifle and had several grenades attached to his vest. His partner was somewhere nearby but still out of sight. Maria's 13th shot from her backup rifle took out the first climber. The man tumbled down the slope, his weapon clattering against the rocks as he fell. His partner immediately took cover and began shouting, either calling for backup or warning other militants about Maria's new position. Overwatch 7, this is Falcon 2-1. We have visual on your smoke and are beginning our attack run on the hostile positions in the valley. Stay low. We're coming in hot. Maria looked up to see the friendly gunship approaching fast and low. It was a beautiful sight, an armed helicopter with military markings, moving with the purposeful efficiency that only came from professional pilots and crew. The aircraft immediately began engaging the militant positions with rockets and machine gun fire. The effect was devastating. The militants who had been trying to set up roadblocks were forced to abandon their positions and seek cover. Several vehicles exploded under the helicopter's rocket fire, sending pillars of smoke into the sky. The few militants who tried to return fire were quickly silenced by the gunship's superior firepower. But Maria still had to deal with the second climber who was somewhere nearby. She could hear him moving, trying to get closer to her position while the helicopter's attack provided cover noise. He was smart and patient, using the chaos below to mask his approach. A grenade landed about 10 meters from Maria's position, exploding with a sharp crack that sent rock fragments flying in all directions. The militant had gotten close enough to throw grenades, which meant he was very dangerous. Maria immediately moved to a different position, knowing that staying in one place would be fatal. She caught a glimpse of movement about 30 meters away and quickly aimed her backup rifle. The second militant was trying to advance while she was distracted by the grenade explosion. Maria's 14th shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around but not dropping him completely. The wounded militant took cover behind a large boulder, and Maria could hear him groaning in pain. But he was still armed and still dangerous. She needed to finish this fight quickly because she could see more movement in the valley below. Additional hostile forces were arriving, drawn by the sound of the battle. Falcon 2-1. This is Overwatch 7. I've got one hostile still active near my position, and it looks like enemy reinforcements are arriving from the east. Can you provide cover while I deal with the climber? Roger that, Overwatch 7. We're engaging the reinforcements now. You take care of your immediate threat. Maria could hear the helicopter's guns chattering as it engaged the new arrivals. The sound was reassuring, but she knew she couldn't rely on air support forever. Helicopters had limited fuel and ammunition, and eventually they would have to return to base. She decided to take the initiative against the wounded militant rather than wait for him to make the next move. Using her knowledge of the terrain, Maria began working her way around to flank his position. It was risky because it would expose her to potential fire from the valley below, but it was better than being pinned down by a desperate enemy fighter. As she moved, Maria could see that the civilian vehicles had made good progress toward safety. They were now well clear of the immediate danger area, though she could still see dust clouds indicating they were continuing to move north toward friendly territory. The wounded militant was apparently also moving, trying to get to a better position or possibly attempting to retreat down the mountain. Maria caught sight of him as he crossed a small clearing, favoring his wounded shoulder but still carrying his rifle. Her 15th shot ended the immediate threat. The militant dropped his weapon and collapsed, rolling several meters down the slope before coming to rest against a tree. Maria waited several minutes to make sure he wasn't feigning death before she considered the immediate area secure. Falcon 2-1, this is Overwatch 7. Immediate threat neutralized. What's the status on those reinforcements? Overwatch 7, we've scattered the reinforcement group. Most are retreating back toward the east. We're running low on fuel and ammunition, but the ground convoy should be reaching your position soon. As if summoned by the radio call, Maria could hear the sound of heavy vehicles approaching from the north. She grabbed her binoculars and scanned the road, finally spotting a convoy of military vehicles racing toward her position. Relief flooded through her as she recognized the markings of friendly forces. The convoy reached the base of the mountain, just as the friendly helicopter was making its final attack run before heading back to refuel. Maria could see soldiers jumping out of the vehicles and immediately beginning to secure the area. Their professional movements and coordinated actions were a welcome sight after hours of fighting alone on the ridge. Overwatch 7, this is Captain Rodriguez. We're at the base of your position. What's your status up there? Captain, this is Overwatch 7. Immediate area is secure. I count 2 hostile KIA near my position, plus the helicopter crew. The main hostile force has been scattered, but some may still be in the area. The civilian vehicles escaped north and should be clear of danger. Outstanding work, Sergeant. We're sending a team up to extract you. Stay put and let us do the climbing for once. Maria allowed herself a brief smile at the captain's comment. Her legs were shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion, and she realized she had been in combat for over 2 hours. The physical and mental strain was catching up with her now that the immediate danger had passed. She used the time to assess her ammunition situation and check her equipment. She had fired 15 rounds from her sniper rifle and several more from her backup weapon. Her radio was still functional, though the battery was getting low. Most importantly, she was uninjured despite the intense firefight. As she waited for the extraction team, Maria took one last look through her scope at the valley below. The scene was dramatically different from the peaceful morning landscape she had observed just hours earlier. Smoke was rising from several locations where vehicles had been destroyed, and she could see the wreckage of the helicopter she had brought down still smoldering on the mountainside. But the most important thing was what she didn't see. There were no civilian vehicles in distress, no families trapped under fire, no children crying in the back of trucks while bullets flew around them. The people she had risked everything to protect were safe, and that made every dangerous moment worth it. Overwatch 7, this is Lieutenant Hayes. I'm leading the extraction team. We're about 10 minutes from your position. How many wounded do you need us to prepare for? Lieutenant, just one combat effective. No friendly casualties up here, but you'll want to check on the civilian vehicles when you get a chance. I saw at least one person who appeared to be injured in the first truck. Copy that. Medical team is already heading north to check on the civilians. We'll have you back down in friendly territory soon. Maria began gathering her equipment and preparing for extraction. She carefully cleaned and secured her sniper rifle, making sure no dirt or debris had gotten into the mechanism during the firefight. Silent Thunder had performed flawlessly throughout the engagement, and she wanted to make sure it stayed in perfect condition. The sound of boots on rocks announced the arrival of the extraction team. Maria could see 4 soldiers working their way up the slope, moving with the careful precision of troops who had been in combat before. They were taking no chances even though she had reported the area secure. Sergeant Santos, Lieutenant Hayes, 3rd Battalion. Hell of a job up here today. The lieutenant was younger than Maria had expected, probably in his mid-20s, but he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had seen action before. His team spread out to provide security while he approached her position. Thank you, sir. Just doing my job. Just doing your job. Hayes shook his head in amazement. Sergeant, you took out a helicopter with a sniper rifle and held off a force 3 times your size for over 2 hours. That's not just doing your job. That's being a hero. Maria felt uncomfortable with the praise. In her mind, she had simply responded to a situation that required action. The alternatives, letting innocent people die while she waited for orders or backup, had never really been options for her. The extraction team worked efficiently to gather intelligence from the area. They photographed the positions where Maria had engaged the militants, collected any useful equipment or documents, and prepared a detailed report of the engagement. Everything had to be documented for later analysis and debriefing. As they prepared to descend the mountain, Maria took one last look at her fighting position. The rocks that had provided her cover were chipped and scarred from enemy fire, and shell casings from her rifle were scattered around the area. In a few days, the evidence of the battle would be cleared away, and the mountain would return to its peaceful state. Sergeant, we just got word from the medical team, Lieutenant Hayes said as they began their descent. The civilians you protected are all safe. The man who was injured in the truck has a broken arm, but everyone else is fine. The families specifically asked me to thank the soldier who saved their lives. Maria nodded, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and relief. The praise from fellow soldiers was nice, but knowing that real people, families with children and grandparents, were going home safely was what really mattered to her. The descent took about 30 minutes, with the team moving carefully to avoid loose rocks and potential ambush sites. When they finally reached the convoy vehicles, Maria was surprised to see a crowd of people waiting for her. Word of her actions had apparently spread quickly through the unit. Captain Rodriguez was the first to greet her. Sergeant Santos, I've been in the Army for 15 years and I've never seen anything like what you did today. Command is very interested in hearing your full report. Sir, I just want to make sure those families are really safe. Are we certain all the militants have been cleared from the area? We've got patrols sweeping the entire valley, and the helicopter crew confirmed that most of the surviving hostiles retreated east toward the border. The threat to the civilian population has been eliminated. Maria felt the tension finally leaving her shoulders. For the first time since the morning radio call that had started this whole ordeal, she could truly relax. The mission was complete, and the people she had been sent to protect were safe. As the convoy prepared to return to base, Maria found herself thinking about the choices she had made during the firefight. There had been moments when following orders strictly would have meant watching innocent people die. She had chosen to act based on her judgment and conscience, and fortunately, everything had worked out. But she also knew that combat situations rarely had clear-cut answers. Today had been one of those rare occasions when the right choice was obvious and the outcome was unambiguously positive. She had been lucky in many ways. Lucky that her shots had been accurate. Lucky that the helicopter had crashed when she hit it. Lucky that friendly reinforcements had arrived when they did. The radio crackled with an incoming message. "All units, this is command. The civilian evacuation convoy has reached friendly territory safely. All families are accounted for and receiving medical attention as needed. Excellent work by all units involved in today's operation." 3 weeks later, Maria found herself sitting in a small cafe in the nearest town, watching children play in the square outside. It was her first day of leave since the mountain engagement, and she had chosen to spend it in the very village she had helped protect. She wanted to see with her own eyes that life had returned to normal for the people who had been caught in that terrifying morning. The cafe owner, an elderly woman named Elena, had recognized Maria when she walked in. Word had spread quickly through the small community about the soldier who had fought alone on the ridge to protect fleeing families. Elena refused to let Maria pay for her coffee and had been bringing her plates of homemade pastries all afternoon. "My grandson was in that second truck," Elena said quietly as she refilled Maria's cup. "He is 8 years old and he still has nightmares about the shooting. But he also talks about the guardian angel on the mountain who saved everyone. He draws pictures of you with your rifle, protecting his family." Maria felt a lump forming in her throat. She had tried not to think too much about the specific individuals she had protected that day, preferring to focus on the tactical aspects of the engagement, but hearing about the 8-year-old boy made the human cost of that morning very real. "I'm just glad everyone made it home safely," Maria replied. "How is the man who was injured?" "I saw him being helped from the first truck. My neighbor, Carlos. His arm healed well, but more importantly, his spirits healed too. For the first week after the attack, he barely spoke. He felt guilty about not being able to protect his family better. But when he learned about what you did, how one person stood against so many to save strangers, it gave him hope again." Through the cafe window, Maria could see some of the families she had protected walking through the square. They looked peaceful and relaxed, going about their daily routines without the fear that had driven them from their homes 3 weeks ago. Children were playing, elderly people were sitting on benches talking, and the whole scene radiated the kind of normal, everyday happiness that was easy to take for granted. Her radio, which she kept with her even on leave, crackled softly. "Sergeant Santos, this is Captain Rodriguez. Sorry to disturb your time off, but we just received some intelligence you should know about." Maria stepped outside to take the call privately. "Go ahead, Captain. We've been analyzing the equipment and documents recovered from the engagement site. It turns out that attack on the village wasn't random. The militants had been planning it for weeks as part of a larger operation to clear civilians from the entire valley. If they had succeeded, it would have displaced hundreds of families and given hostile forces control of a key strategic area. The weight of this information settled on Maria's shoulders. She had known the engagement was important, but understanding the broader implications made her realize how many more lives had been affected by her actions that morning. "There's more," Captain Rodriguez continued. "The helicopter you brought down was carrying a senior militant commander who had been coordinating attacks throughout the region. His elimination has disrupted their operations significantly. Command wants you to know that your actions that day prevented a much larger humanitarian crisis." After the call ended, Maria sat on a bench in the square and watched the children playing. She thought about the 8-year-old boy who drew pictures of her, and about all the other children in the valley who were able to sleep safely in their own beds because of what had happened on the mountain. A young girl, maybe 6 years old, approached her shyly. She was holding a small bouquet of wildflowers and looking nervous. Behind her, a woman who was obviously her mother smiled encouragingly. "Are you the soldier lady who saved my family?" the girl asked in a small voice. Maria knelt down to the child's eye level. "I'm a soldier, yes, but I think maybe your family saved themselves by being brave and helping each other." The girl considered this seriously, then held out the flowers. "These are for you. Mama says you were very brave and we should say thank you." As Maria accepted the flowers, she felt tears forming in her eyes. All the training, all the years of preparing for combat, all the technical skills with weapons and tactics, none of it had prepared her for this moment. A small child, innocent and trusting, thanking her for doing what any decent person would do when faced with such a situation. "Thank you," Maria said softly. "These are the most beautiful flowers anyone has ever given me." The girl beamed and ran back to her mother, who approached Maria with her own expression of gratitude. "I was in the second truck that day," the woman said. "My daughter doesn't fully understand what happened, but I do. You risked your life for people you had never met. There are no words adequate to express our gratitude." As the afternoon wore on, more families approached Maria to express their thanks. Each conversation was brief but meaningful, and she began to understand the true impact of her actions that morning. It wasn't just about the tactical success or the military objectives that had been achieved. It was about real people living real lives, and her decision to act had allowed those lives to continue. When evening came, Maria walked back toward the base, her mind full of the day's conversations. She thought about the young lieutenant's words on the mountain, calling her a hero. At the time, she had dismissed the comment, but now she was beginning to understand what he meant. Heroism wasn't about being fearless or superhuman. It was about making the right choice when the stakes were highest, even when that choice involved personal risk. It was about seeing people in danger and deciding that their lives mattered more than your own safety. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her sister back home. "Saw the news report about your unit's action. Mom is worried but proud. Dad says to tell you that Grandpa would have been proud too." Maria smiled, thinking about her grandfather who had served in a different war decades ago. He had never talked much about his combat experiences, but he had always emphasized the importance of protecting innocent people and standing up for what was right. She felt a connection to him across the years, understanding now some of what he must have experienced. As she reached the base gate, Maria looked back toward the mountain ridge where everything had happened. The setting sun was casting long shadows across the valley, and the scene looked peaceful and serene. It was hard to believe that such a beautiful place had been the site of such violence just 3 weeks ago, but that was the nature of her job, bringing peace to places where violence threatened, protecting the innocent when evil tried to prevail. It wasn't glamorous work, and it often went unnoticed by the wider world. But moments like today, when she could see the faces of the people she had helped save, made everything worthwhile. Maria walked through the gate and toward her quarters, carrying the wildflowers the little girl had given her. Tomorrow she would return to duty, back to the routine of training and preparing for the next mission. But tonight she would sleep peacefully, knowing that somewhere in the valley below, families were safe in their homes because of choices made on a mountain ridge when backup was called for. But her sniper rifle answered first.